When I was 16, my mother told me I belonged in the basement. Her voice was cold, final, like a judge handing out a life sentence. My father didn't say a word, he just looked away, pretending to be too tired to care. I remember standing there, holding my backpack, wondering what I had done to deserve this kind of punishment. I wasn't a troublemaker. I didn't drink, didn't go out, didn't talk back. My only crime was being different, quieter, more focused on things they didn't understand. The basement was dark and smelled like damp concrete, with only one small window that barely let in light. My mother tossed down an old mattress and said, "Make yourself comfortable." I said nothing. She wanted a reaction, tears, anger, something she could use to say I was the problem. Instead, I stayed silent. Silence became my only weapon. They thought they were burying me down there to forget me, but they were giving me time, space, and fuel for something far greater than their cruelty. Every night, I listened to their laughter upstairs. The clinking of glasses, the sound of the television, and my mother's voice telling her friends how difficult I was. I sat under that single bulb and started drawing on the concrete floor. I used chalk, pencils, anything I could find. My mind became my escape. I designed machines, sketches of inventions I had only imagined before. I read old science books I found at a thrift shop, pages yellow and torn, but filled with knowledge that lit a fire inside me. Months turned into years. I learned how to fix old electronics people threw away. I salvaged broken radios, televisions, and computer parts from the garbage and rebuilt them. Piece by piece, the basement became my laboratory. The same space they used to shame me became the place that taught me more than school ever could. I didn't need anyone's approval anymore. I was building something powerful, myself. One night, the lights upstairs went out. I heard my mother shouting at my father, blaming him for forgetting to pay the bill. They had no backup plan, no candles, no working flashlight. I stayed quiet in the dark, listening to their panic. After hours of yelling, my mother came down to the basement for the first time in months. Her tone was bitter but nervous. "Do you have a light?" she asked. I stood there, holding the small battery-powered lamp I had built from scrap. Without saying a word, I handed it to her. She looked at it, then at me, confused at how perfectly it worked. She walked upstairs without a thank you, but that was fine. I didn't need it. Over time, things upstairs got worse for them. My father lost his job. The bills piled up. They started arguing every night. I kept to myself, working quietly in my basement world, developing an idea that had been growing in my mind for years, a small, portable solar-powered generator that could power a house during blackouts. I spent months testing it, adjusting the design, and perfecting every circuit until it finally worked. When I was 20, I left the basement for the first time, not to eat or help upstairs but to leave the house entirely. I carried my invention with me to a local tech competition. I remember walking into that big hall, surrounded by people who looked confident and proud. I was wearing an old jacket and carrying my project in a worn-out bag, but when I set it up and powered an entire section of lights using only my small generator, the crowd went silent. The judges asked question after question, amazed that someone so young had built it from scraps. A few months later, I received an offer from a major company that wanted to buy my design and help me develop it for real-world use. When I returned home, my mother was sitting at the kitchen table, her face pale, eyes full of confusion. She asked where I'd been, and I told her calmly that I had been at a presentation, that my invention had won first place, and that a company wanted to partner with me. For the first time, she didn't have anything cruel to say. She just stared. My father asked if they could see it, and I nodded. I showed them how it worked, how something built in their forgotten basement could light up the whole house. The same house they'd once refused to give me a room in. Weeks later, when reporters came to our home to interview me, my parents stood behind me, smiling for the cameras, pretending they had supported me all along. But I knew the truth, and deep down, so did they. That night, after everyone left, my mother came down to the basement. She looked around, at the wires, the notes, the sketches on the walls. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, she whispered, "I didn't know you could do all this." I smiled faintly. "You never asked," I said. From that day, things changed. They treated me differently, not out of love, but out of guilt and necessity. They begged me to stay, to forgive, to let them be a part of what I had built. But forgiveness wasn't something I could give so easily. They had buried me in that basement, but the darkness only helped me grow stronger. When I was a teenager, my family made it clear I didn't belong anywhere in the house except the basement. My mother's words were harsh and final. You belong in the basement. My father didn't intervene. He just nodded silently, as if agreeing that my presence upstairs was a burden. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply went down the narrow staircase, feeling the chill of the concrete walls against my skin, and settled into the small space they had relegated me to. At first, it felt like punishment. The basement was dark, damp, and smelled faintly of mildew. The single bulb hanging from the ceiling cast long, distorted shadows, and the small window near the ceiling barely let in light. I lay on the thin mattress they tossed down, listening to their laughter and conversations above, feeling invisible and unwanted. But in that silence, something shifted. I realized that the basement, which they had intended as a cage, could become my refuge. I had time to think, to plan, and to create without interruptions. I began salvaging broken electronics from the trash, pulling apart old radios, computers, and kitchen appliances. Piece by piece, I learned to understand how things worked. I spent nights sketching designs for gadgets, machines, and inventions that existed only in my imagination. The basement became a laboratory, a workshop, and a library. I read every book I could find, learning from the pages that smelled of dust and history. Years passed, and my family's cruelty never lessened, but their neglect became my strength. I learned patience, resilience, and ingenuity. I built small devices to solve everyday problems. A battery-powered light for the basement, a self-watering system for the few plants I kept, and eventually, a more ambitious project, a portable generator capable of powering an entire home. I worked in silence, focused, and relentless, while my family remained above, thinking I was wasting my life in the darkness. The turning point came when disaster struck our neighborhood. A sudden storm knocked out the electricity for days. Families struggled in the dark, including my own. My mother and father argued bitterly, shouting at each other and blaming everyone but themselves. I stayed in the basement, calm, knowing that I had spent years preparing for this moment. I activated my generator and carried it upstairs. The lights flickered to life, illuminating every corner of the house. My parents froze, their anger replaced by disbelief. For once, they were the ones powerless, the ones needing help, and I was the one who held the solution. Word of the generator spread quickly. Neighbors came knocking, curious about the lights that shone from our house while others remained dark. I demonstrated my invention, explaining how it worked, showing them the careful planning and innovation behind it. People were amazed. Invitations followed, from schools, local tech fairs, and even companies interested in developing the idea further. Suddenly, the basement kid, the one my mother had scorned, became the person everyone turned to in a crisis. My parents could no longer dismiss me or pretend I was useless. They were forced to acknowledge my talent, my resilience, and my intelligence. At first, their acknowledgement came with guilt. My mother and father tried to intervene, offering praise that felt hollow, asking questions as if they had always believed in me. I answered politely but kept my distance. Their approval no longer mattered. I had built something that could change lives, something they could never have imagined. And yet, in the background, I felt a quiet satisfaction watching them adjust to the reality they had ignored for so long. Months later, I had the opportunity to present my generator at a major technology expo. The judges and audience were impressed by the innovation, efficiency, and practicality of the design. Offers came from investors and companies willing to fund mass production. It was a turning point in my life, a validation not just of my work, but of every night spent in the cold, dark basement, learning, creating, and dreaming. When I returned home, my parents were waiting. They no longer tried to assert dominance or scorn me. Instead, they asked questions, wanting to understand, wanting to be part of what I had built. I showed them the details of my invention, the circuits, the components, and the logic behind every decision. Their amazement was genuine this time, tinged with the realization that they had underestimated me for years. Over time, the dynamic shifted completely. My parents, who had once ridiculed me and locked me away, became dependent on me in subtle ways. They asked for guidance, advice, and help with problems that only my skills could solve. I no longer saw them as the people who had confined me but as individuals who had underestimated the strength and potential of their child. Their begging was not about forgiveness alone, it was about recognizing the value they had ignored. I had become their lifeline in ways they never anticipated. The basement, once a symbol of shame and rejection, had become a place of triumph. I had used the isolation and neglect to build skills, resilience, and confidence. I had turned their cruelty into motivation, their dismissal into a challenge. When I walk past that old space now, I don't see darkness, I see the foundation of my independence, the birthplace of my accomplishments, and the turning point that forced them to see me for who I truly am.